Welcome to All Horse Racing All the Time. I'm your host, Al. In this video, I address the question, who is better, Sierra Leone or Fierceness? Now, this video stems off of yesterday's video that I did, an update of the Travers Stakes, 2024 Travers Stakes at Saratoga. Now, I got some feedback, both in email and in comments on the video, the Travers Stakes update, saying Sierra Leone is better than Fierceness. What are you, crazy? I mean, so I thought, let's take a look. In all fairness, let's take a look at the two horses, Sierra Leone and Fierceness, and come up with who I believe is better. Personally, I think it's a no-brainer. I think Fierceness is better. But for all the Sierra Leone fans, I wonder, reading those comments, is this a case, people, pro Sierra Leone, is this a case of a fan of the horse just blindly saying, yeah, this horse is better? And I try and look at it with an unbiased eye. Well, I do look at it with an unbiased eye. I don't just try. And we're going to take a closer look. And what I'm going to do here is bring up some data. And we'll see who is the faster horse. And what I'm going to do is bring up some data. And this data is good through the Kentucky Derby. You can take a snapshot look at these horses and see who is the faster horse. That's all. Who's the faster horse? Who's better? Who has a better chance to achieve greatness? And settle this once and for all. If not settle it once and for all, because there's still races to go this year. The 3-year-old, top 3-year-old, it's a crapshoot at this point. There are a bunch of them in the runnings and the rankings that have won major races. But who is the best one? And more specifically, who is better, Sierra Leone or Fierceness? So what I'm going to do is bring up the Thorograph numbers. Thorograph, for those of you unfamiliar, those are PPs that you can get for every card within the United States if you're playing the races. Now these PPs, they cost $25, and they are accurate. They take into consideration track conditions, the wind direction, ground lost or ground gained, trouble on the track. So they cost $25 a pop. So most people don't use these when they're playing the races. But you know who uses these? Owners, trainers, when horses are going up for a claim, when owners, trainers are spotting their horses within a race, they go by these figures. It's not just the player who uses Thorograph. It is the people within the business when making key decisions in purchasing a horse, spotting a horse, the whole 9 yards. And it's well worth it. It's well worth it. $25, it's not like the buyer figures where they just go by pure finishing time. They don't take into consideration the wind or anything else, ground loss. So this data tells a story. So let's bring up Fierceness. Let's bring up Sierra Leone. Let's see what's going on with these horses. And who is the faster horse? Who is the better horse? We'll begin with Fierceness. Let's take a look. Okay, now what Thorograph does is, I'm not sure if you can see this that well, but you probably can if you look close. With Thorograph, they condense everything into one number. The lower the number, the faster the race. So there's no guesswork involved. For example, if one horse ran a 5 in a race and the other horse ran a 3 in a race, each number, each point is good for a couple of lengths or so, depending on the distance. The 3 horse ran faster than the 5 horse. So let's take a look at Fierceness. Start with him. Now, if you go back and look at Fierceness's career, he has, in his first career race, he ran a 3. In the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, he ran a -1. To put this into perspective, a -1, championship horses, Breeders' Cup horses, older horses, most of them you don't see with a negative number. -1, I mean, and you can see that pattern. It's evident right here. He ran a 3 the first race, which is very fast. A maiden race running a 3 at Saratoga. You don't see maidens running 3s. His second race in October, Fierceness has that good, bad pattern. Due for a good race, then a bad race, then a good race, and a bad race. He turned around at Aqueduct in October and ran a 12, a major regression, finishing 20 lengths back, 7th place after a brilliant maiden race where he won by 11. And then he comes back in the Breeders' Cup, throws up that -1, wins the Breeders' Cup by 6.5 lengths, and 6.5, a -1. When they say minus, what do you mean by that, Al? A minus number. It means it's fast. It's not only fast, whereas like the three Fierceness ran in his maiden race was fast. Now you're going less than 0. I mean, that's uncharted waters. He runs a -1. Are you kidding me? A 2-year-old running a -1? Then he slips back to a bad race, Gulfstream Park, runs a 4. So -1, a 4 compared to a -1, that's like slipping back 5 points. That's like slipping back 10 lengths, 10, 12 lengths. And then he comes back in the Florida Derby, and as if his -1 wasn't fast enough, he runs a -3 in the Florida Derby. How fast is a -3? That's like flight line material. Off the charts good. -3. Holy crap. Okay, and you're going to see when I get to Sierra Leone the difference here. We're talking already a -1, a -3, and then a Kentucky Derby. Runs a 12, finishes in 15th place, 24 back. So he follows that pattern. Good race, bad race, good race, bad race. But here's one thing to keep in mind. You're talking about that pattern. Good race, bad race, good race, bad race for Fierceness. What is the one theme that has been consistent in all his bad races? Before you jump on this pattern thing and think the next race is going to be a bad race. Because he won the Jim Dandy. I don't know what kind of numbers. The number's not out yet. What his number was for the Jim Dandy Stakes. Was it negative? Probably not. Probably about a 0 or something, or a 1. It was good race. He bounced back. Let's just put it that way. I'd be really surprised if it's in the negative category, but we'll see. Before you jump on that bandwagon of, oh yeah, the next race he's due for a bad race, what is the one consistent thing that's happened in all of his bad races? He got a bad start. Got a bad start. If you go back to his second race last year, he lunged at the start. You go back to his bad race in January. What happened in that race? He got pinballed. So he bounced off horses to start that race. And what happened at the Kentucky Derby? He hopped at the start. Hopped at the start. That's a big deal. That takes you out of it. How many times do you see a horse, especially an early speed horse, get stuck in the gate, right? Has a bad start, and then rushes back into the race? That's what Fierceness did in the Kentucky Derby. And it wasn't enough. They rush back. They exert extra energy to get back into the race after a bad start. And what happens? What do you see happen all the time? They get back in the race, then they run out of gas and they fade. They fade. It's tough to overcome a bad start. So that's what happened in all of Fierceness's bad races. And what happened last race in the Jim Dandy the other day? He got off to a good start. What happens? Lo and behold, he wins. And that's what he's done every time he's had a good start. So we're talking Fierceness, pure speed figures, -1, -3. We're talking negative numbers, which is very, very unusual for a cult 2-3-year-old. So let's go down to Sierra Leone. Let's look. The Sierra Leone, how does he stack up? You have Fierceness's best 3 races, a 3 in the maiden race, a -1 in the Breeders' Cup, and a -3 in the Florida Derby. And we don't know what number he had in the Jim Dandy, but it was pretty good. Okay. So we're talking about a horse that's running negative numbers, which is exceptionally fast. So now we're going to go to Sierra Leone. Let's bring Sierra up. Now, Sierra Leone, I think Sierra Leone is a very nice horse, a terrific horse. I root for him. I wasn't rooting for him against Fierceness because Fierceness is my favorite horse of the 3-year-olds. Let's take a look at Sierra Leone. Okay, there's Sierra Leone. Now, this has every race up until the Derby. And as you know, in the Belmont Stakes, he did not win. And then who knows what number he put up in the Jim Dandy. But here, taking a look at Sierra Leone, remember, Fierceness is running these negative numbers, which is crazy. And the lower the number, the faster the race. Sierra Leone, maiden race, a 9. Fierceness doesn't run 9s. 9, 4, 4, 1, 1. No negative numbers to show here for Sierra Leone. Remember, Fierceness ran already a -3 and a -1. Sierra Leone, put it, to show what a difference it is. Sierra Leone is running 1s as his fastest races, last 2 races, and whatever he put up in the Belmont Stakes and the Jim Dandy. I guarantee you they were not negative numbers. You're taking Fierceness, a horse that put up a -3. That's about 10 lengths better than Sierra Leone's best effort. Sierra Leone, a beautiful horse cult. But you gotta, tell it like it is. Just not even close to being as fast as Fierceness when he brings his A game. Nice horse. The one thing I will say about Sierra Leone, if it does come deciding the top 3-year-old, the top 3-year-old's probably going to come out of the winner of the Travers because it's so close. Unless one of them wins the Breeders' Cup. And which one of those between Sierra Leone and Fierceness has the best chance to win the Breeders' Cup? I believe Sierra Leone has the better chance of winning the Breeders' Cup just based on his running style, the big closing kick. And I expect the Breeders' Cup to have a lot of speed. Fierceness would be up against it. I mean, he'd have, if Fierceness runs in the Breeders' Cup and runs his -3, he probably wins. But there's a lot of speed signed on, and you have 2 dynamic horses in that race. You have National Treasure from Bob Baffert, and you have White Abarrio, who is, you talk about negative numbers and Thorograph and speed figures. White Abarrio has a past speed figure of -5. -5. Race over. I don't know what's up with White Abarrio this year. He hasn't looked sharp. But White Abarrio, if White Abarrio wins, he brings his A game to the Breeders' Cup Classic. I mean, that's the one to beat. But what does White Barrio have left in the tank? But a National Treasure, I mean, he's like a Powerball. Just runs hard, fast, out front, hangs on, shows his grittiness, a ton of earnings. He's developed into an amazing, amazing cult. So yeah, Fierceness would be up against it. Running styles all taken into play. I think Sierra Leone would have a better chance of winning the Breeders' Cup than Fierceness. I don't think either of them are going to win the Breeders' Cup, as is any others out there. So you see Sierra Leone running his ones. Those are great numbers, by the way, ones, but they're not negative like Fierceness. So you're talking about two different types of animals here. You have one that shows signs of greatness, especially considering it's only a 3-year-old, already running negative numbers as a 2-year-old. Will Fierceness run as a 4-year-old? I don't know. I mean, right now, owner Mike Rapoli, he's just having fun right now. Running the races and winning money. Wins the Jim Dandy, wins the Florida Derby, wins the Breeders' Cup last year with Fierceness. He's having fun right now. And trust me, this guy is not going to sell this horse. He's not going to sell Fierceness. The real fun's going to begin when he starts breeding him and then rake in the money, because his breeding rights are already stamped. Horse has done this, 2-year-old champion, Breeders' Cup winner, G1 winner multiple times. Excuse me. His breeding, forget about it. Does he run as a 4-year-old? Maybe Rapoli runs him as a 4-year-old, looking to win Horse of the Year, looking for a Fierceness to mature and get faster. Because right now, as a 3-year-old, if he goes in the Breeders' Cup, a 3-year-old versus a 4-year-old, it's like talking about a 17-year-old, human standards, a 17-year-old going up against somebody in their young 20s. All right. The person in their 20s is going to be more physically developed, and horses develop quickly, even within a few months compared to humans. You're talking about a 17-year-old versus an adult. The adult is stronger, probably faster. And that's why it's such a tall order to go in there in the Breeders' Cup as a 3-year-old. I mean, Curlin was an exception, turns around and wins the freaking Breeders' Cup at Monmouth in 2007. And that was a rare year for 3-year-olds. When I saw them coming around, I'm just getting goosebumps thinking about it. When I saw them coming around the turn for home, watch the replay of the 2007 Breeders' Cup, I'm even getting a tear in my eye. And seeing Curlin, Street Sense, hard spun, the 3-year-olds turning for home in front, it was just a sight to behold. That's not the case this year with these 3-year-olds, but you get the idea. It's like a 17-year-old going up against a young adult. So, but Sierra Leone, I think, would have the best chance just because of the style, the running style, the closing style, and all the early speed that's going to be signed on. What about the other one that probably has a slight edge in the 3-year-old standings right now is Darnark. Everyone's talking about him. I talked about him, and I picked him as one of the players in my Kentucky Derby picks. And I had a couple people that are actually employed in big shots in the racing business, and they said, no way, this horse is not good. Now they're singing his praises, right? But I called it, and anyway, so let's go to Darnark. And why'd I call it? A big part was these Serigraph figures. Now, he finished up the track. Here we go here. I liked him because of the early pace. But now remember, we're talking Sierra Leone running ones. We're talking Fierceness running negative numbers, right? So Look at Darnark. Coming out of the Kentucky Derby, his fastest number of them all was 6. That stinks compared to Sierra Leone and Fierceness. I mean, 6, not even in the ballpark. But what does he have going for him? He does have early speed. So, if he wins it, Danny Gargano, he's going to have to win it on the front end. But as far as, Sierra Leone, if he doesn't run into all that trouble in the Belmont Stakes, he aces Dornoch. And Dornoch, he had everything go his way. And nice horse. Okay, nice horse. He's won a couple of races. And he did win the Haskell. I remember I said he has early speed, right? Well, Haskell is as speed favoring a track as you're ever going to find. If you have early speed, you don't have to have the best numbers. You could run away on that freaking track. It's like a conveyor belt. It's built for speed. So Darnock winning the Haskell, speed-wise, he's not even in the same stratosphere as Sierra Leone and Fierceness. So, and he'll get pressured in this race, and the Travers. And we've seen now 2 of Fierceness's best races. He didn't have the lead. He took over entering the turn for home. So he doesn't need the lead. He can stalk. Darnock, he can't stalk. And Darnock, he's going to get pressed by Seize the Gray, who's also going to be in there. Let's talk about we'll leave it at that right now. Seize the Gray, I believe, is we've seen the best from him in the Preakness, I believe. So there you see it by the numbers, all right? It's pretty clear. It's pretty evident for any naysayers against Fierceness that he's the fastest horse, fastest 3-year-old in the country. There's one other 3-year-old I want to bring up. It just came to me now. What about the Japanese horse? I mean, people say this is the best horse. What's its name? Here he is, Forever Young. Let's look at his numbers. Now, remember, he finished in a photo finish, a blanket finish with Mystic Dan and Sierra Leone. And I'm going to bring up one other too while we're at it, Mystic Dan. Now, if you look at the Japanese horse, last 3 races, including the Kentucky Derby, by the thoroughgraph numbers, the lower the number, the faster the race, he comes off 3 straight 1s. Now, this one has done nothing wrong. He won 5 straight and finished 3rd by a head in the Kentucky Derby. 3 straight 1s, which puts this one, Forever Young, on the same page, same exact page, numbers-wise, speed figures-wise, as Sierra Leone. 1s. Still not as fast as Fierceness with his negative numbers. -1, -3. Fierceness on his best is also quite a bit faster than Forever Young. But Forever Young is right up there with these 3 straight numbers of 1. So right there. And how about Mystic Dan? Poor Mystic Dan. Why aren't we talking about him? The Kentucky Derby winner. Okay, let's take a look at Mystic Dan. Now, Mystic Dan had the perfect trip. He had a couple of 3s. Now, you're going to find this interesting as far as the thoroughgraph goes, thoroughgraph numbers. Like Sierra Leone ran a 1 in the Kentucky Derby. Now, these numbers, they take into account ground loss, everything else. 1. And Mystic Dan ran a 3, a slower number than Sierra Leone, but he won the race. How does a horse that ran a slower race beat a horse that ran a faster race? Well, I'll tell you how. And so he ran a 3. They take into account ground loss, everything else. They condense these speed figures into one number. Mystic Dan ran a perfect trip. If you look at the notes, I can see them. You can't. It's too small. Never ran wide, covered the least amount, the most efficient route, covered as little ground as possible, very clean trip. So, and whereas Sierra Leone at one point was running 4 wide. So Sierra Leone covered more ground in the same amount of time. So that's why Sierra Leone gets the nod as far as the speed figure goes. But Mystic Dan, he ran 3s. But if you look at the race 3 back at a wet track in February at Oaklawn, Mystic Dan on a wet track won by 8 lengths and threw up a 0, which is, by the numbers, the next fastest horse, next fastest 3-year-old out there outside of Fierceness. So show Mystic Dan some respect, especially if it's on a wet track. He threw a 0 up there, very quick. So to sum this up, I think it's pretty cut and dried. Fierceness is the fastest horse. I'm sorry for those of you out there who love Sierra Leone and you want to argue. I get it. You want to stick up for your horse, right? You want to stick up for your horse. And that, that's admirable. But there comes a time where a reality check comes into play. And you want to take a closer look and admit who's the best. Fierceness.